Good evening. I'm your host, Michael J., representing the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County. We are co-hosting tonight's forum with the League of Women Voters of San Juan County, League of Women Voters of Skagit County, the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County, and the League of Women Voters of Whidbey Island. Founded in 1920, the League is a nonpartisan organization with more than 700 affiliates in all 50 states. Our goals are to encourage informed and active participation in government, increase an understanding of major public policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. Membership is open to all people aged 16 and older, and we invite you to join. Tonight's forum is being broadcast on BTV and the City of Bellingham's YouTube channel. Recordings of this program will be available on the League of Women Voters of Bellingham-Whatcom County website and at the City of Bellingham YouTube channel. The forum will be rebroadcast on BTV and 102.3 KMRE Community Radio up through Election Day, November 8th. No portion of this forum may be rebroadcast in part or in full without the written consent of the League of Women Voters. Questions for this forum have been prepared in advance by the League with input from the public. The Cascadia Daily News, Linden Tribune, Salish Current, the Northern Light, and 102.3 KMRE Community Radio are our media partners. Tonight, we're hosting candidates for the U.S. Congressional District 2 representative. Congressional representatives are elected to a 2-year term to serve the people of a specific congressional district. Among other duties, representatives introduce bills and resolutions, offer amendments, and serve on committees. Members spend a good deal of time meeting with people in their state to discuss issues of concern. They also oversee the administration of public policy. Their annual salary is $174,000. I would like now to introduce and welcome the candidates in alphabetical order. We have Rick Nelson, candidate Rick Nelson, and we have Larsen, sorry about that, I knew that, and candidate Dan Matthews. Here are the rules. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Then candidates will make a 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate has a challenge card that they will use once during this, forum. The challenger has 30 seconds to state their challenge. The challenged candidate has 30 seconds then to respond. I will ask candidates to speak in alphabetical order and alternate order for the first question, reversing the order for the following question. The timer displayed on the screen will count down your remaining time. The timer will be purple when you begin, then turn to yellow when 15 seconds remain. When the time is up, the timer will turn red. And if you continue speaking after the time limit, we may cut your microphone and publicly chastise you. Are there any questions regarding the rules?
No.
Okay, if our timer is ready, we can start.
Timer is ready.
First question. Perfect. Thank you for that, Ed. Our first question, our opening question, goes first to candidate Larsen, and that is, how would you describe the principles that guide you in making personal decisions, and how would those principles be reflected in your legislative priorities?
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael and League, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the folks who are tuning in as well. I was born and raised in Arlington, Washington. My family's been in the area for well over 120 years. And that local touch, that local sense of what our needs are, really drives me to serve in Congress. It's a principle of making decisions based on what's best for the community. I am one of 8. My dad was on the city council. My mom was very active in schools, pushed us to be in schools, active in our schools as well. And what that meant was that we needed to devote some of our time to our community and to public service. And that is the basic principle that drives me in Congress, especially when I look at the issues we're facing, including continuing the job creation, controlling costs for working families, supporting our veterans as well. issues like continuing to fight to overturn the Dobbs decision and support a woman's right to reproductive health choices. The principle of really staying focused on the community and a public service is important to me, and I hope that I can earn people's votes as a result. Thanks.
Thank you. We turn to you now, Candidate Matthews, with the same question.
Thank you, Michael and League, for this opportunity, and thank you, Mr. Larsen, for meeting. I guess when it comes down to it, right at the start, I have to recognize, first and foremost, I'm a man of faith, and that just isn't an aspect of me, it's the center, the hub around which everything else revolves. After that is, of course, my family, my wife and 4 children and 12 grandchildren. And then family and friends certainly are an aspect of that, the freedoms we enjoy, and then the future. Involved in this race, the central question I have is what kind of America, what kind of a world do we want to leave the next generation? That compels me daily in my meetings with constituents throughout the 5 counties of our district. What is it, 775,000 plus people. And I want to hear the voice of the people, and I've heard it loud and clear. The motivation I have is to listen to them, to represent them. My background, a bachelor's in political science and a master's in public administration, and an internship for a senator who taught me in his mentorship especially about integrity. That drives me, that compels me, and that is an overriding consideration in everything I feel we'll talk about tonight.
Thank you, Candidate Matthews. You're going to be answering the next question first, Candidate Matthews, and that question is, many believe political polarization is having a negative impact on reaching bipartisan solutions to many of today's issues. If you agree with this sentiment, what will you do to bridge political and philosophical divides?
Well, thank you. And that is absolutely the number one dilemma that we are facing in America. The other problems that we have, whether it's regarding the economy, energy, borders, all of those issues really take a second seat to the polarization, the division in our country. That is where we are really challenged, both at home and especially in Washington, D.C., where one party in control seems to be bent on dividing the nation. They may talk about unity, but yet we do not have unity. And as far as I understand, Mr. McCarthy has yet to be invited to the White House. Imagine, after almost 2 years, Mr. Biden has not yet invited the minority leader to the White House. That speaks of division, and we need to come together. I intend to bring statesmanship and civility and not division to the office. I hope to step across the aisle to build bridges wherever I can, because that is actually part of what pilots do in our profession. We call it crew resource management, but working together to find common ground. And that should be our ethic in Congress and even as individuals, to find the common ground between us. And if you will, put on our big boy pants and stop the bickering, because the public expects that of us. The public deserves that.
Thank you, Candidate Matthews. Now let's go to Candidate Larsen. Same question.
Thanks for the question. And there is a problem with political polarization in the United States today. It is seemingly worse than it was even 20 years ago when I was first elected. Certainly seems worse than what we read about back when John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were fighting each other for the presidency, and things were pretty bad then too, even in the time of the founding of the Constitution. But we have a problem today, and so I think it's important to look at the record and look at my record, because I think if you look at my record, you'll see an example of someone reaching across the aisle. Back to the bipartisan Wild Sky Wilderness bill that President Bush signed into law that I fought hard for to get created back in 2006, to as recently as 2021 last year when I worked with the Republican Ron Estes from Kansas to write and to get passed the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Act, a bill that really focused on the mom and pop aerospace suppliers that build the parts and components that go into airplanes. Ron and I saved 30,000, protected 30,000 aviation jobs around the country as a result of our bipartisan effort. I'm very proud of that. I've also worked a lot on transit issues, and transit is a bipartisan issue. I have a partner in that effort with a representative Republican from the state of Illinois. We're working on public transit and funding for public transit. So look at the example that I'm setting as a way to break through political polarization.
Thank you, candidate Larsen. The next question will go to you first. A 2021 U.S. Census report shared that nearly 20% of American households carry medical debt, with higher rates of households with children under 18. Medical debt can lead to the inability to access needed medical care and even personal bankruptcy. Medicare for All has been offered as one solution. Would you endorse this? Why or why not?
Thanks for the question. I don't endorse Medicare for All. I don't think it will address the issue of medical debt. I do support the Affordable Care Act. I fought very hard to get the Affordable Care Act passed. As a result of the Affordable Care Act passing, we have seen the uninsured rate in Washington state drop down in the 5% range from about 14 to 15% before the bill passed. In addition to that, we strengthened the Affordable Care Act recently with the passage of a bill in August of this year, making healthcare more affordable for thousands of families around the country by extending tax credits to those folks who are purchasing in these healthcare exchanges, especially those folks who are challenged economically. So I think there are ways to address the affordability and accessibility of healthcare so that in the future we don't have people falling into medical debt, and we have some work to do. Most recently, Congress passed a law to give Medicare the authority to negotiate lower drug prices for seniors who are on the Medicare drug program, and also to cap their out-of-pocket costs. So we're addressing these costs for our seniors in healthcare as well, and the Affordable Care Act is helping folks afford healthcare in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, candidate Larsen. Let's turn now to candidate Matthews. The same question, please.
Well, I agree. I don't favor the single payer. I think that's a mistake. And I think healthcare is certainly an issue, even with my own family. All of our kids and their spouses are building their own homes and families, and medical debt is always a consideration with every family. The concern I have is always big government. One party seems to have an answer to everything being big government, entering in. And when we know when big government gets involved, costs go up, prices go up. Look at college costs. When the colleges know that big government is paying, they keep escalating, and it's out of sight. And this is the same for healthcare. We need to always provide the private option for people and allow people to opt into the Medicare and the public option, but certainly to be able to access the private option. And under that umbrella, people will see prices go down. In the next month or so, the Affordable Care Act will suddenly strike us as being unaffordable as the bills start coming in, and we'll see those costs start escalating. And that's the lie that is always sold. This is lower costs. Your costs will go down. And we, in fact, have seen that they haven't. In our own home, the costs have gone out of sight, just simply because whenever government gets involved, they always ratchet it up. And that's the cost, but not the service.
Thank you, candidate Matthews. This next question will go to you first. If elected, what do you believe are the next steps after the Dobbs v. Jackson women's health decision overturning Roe v. Wade regarding women's reproductive health?
Well, thank you. Well, the Dobbs decision was very specific in returning to the states where it should have been under our federal umbrella, the decision, allowing it up to the states rather than the federal government to intervene. And I don't see that changing. I don't see the court backing off that position. My own position is very specific, and I want it understood because Mr. Larsen talked about bipartisanship and polarization and all that. And he's been going around telling everybody that I'm a right-wing extremist, I don't know, fundamentalist, MAGA Republican, going to take away women's reproductive health rights. That's absolutely false. That is not my objective at all. What I am proposing is that we free ourselves from the death option only, which Mr. Larsen and his group have been selling, and instead balance that response with the adoption option. If we can give $533 million a year to Planned Parenthood and their affiliates, we can give an equal amount to adoption services, to foster the life option, but more importantly, to the pro-life and the church community. My battle will be to take to them the challenge to step up and be the caring people that they need to be to come around those women and help them in this critical life choice. That is compassion, and that will restore our humanity.
Thank you. The same question to you, candidate Larsen.
Thanks, Michael. I'm the only 100% pro-choice candidate in this race, been endorsed by the Planned Parenthood Action Fund as well, and I oppose the Dobbs decision. And the day the work started to overturn the Dobbs decision started that Friday when the Dobbs decision came out. And I will work to overturn the Dobbs decision and return a reproductive health care right to women. I've voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe v. Wade in federal law. I voted for a bill that would protect women who cross state lines in order to receive a legal medical procedure. And I oppose any steps towards a national abortion ban. Recent legislation in the U.S. Senate has given has shown the lie of the argument that this is about states' rights, when continues to be a national effort to further restrict abortion as a legal medical procedure available to people who need it. So I stand with the people who are pro-choice, and I look forward to a rally tomorrow in Bellingham, where I will be to rally on behalf of that. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question will go to you first, candidate Larsen. And that question is, do you believe climate change is a concern? And if so, what further actions would you take, or what efforts would you support, in addition to the recently adopted Inflation Reduction Act, to address climate change if you are elected?
Not only is climate change a concern, it's real. And not only is it real, it is human caused. And I want folks to slow down just a little bit, because we just only passed the largest investment in fighting climate change in the history of this country. And I have had a few people ask me, well, what are you going to do more of? First off, I'm going to work to implement the current provisions of this effort to fight climate change, which will decrease our climate emissions by 40%. And in addition to that, we have the investments that we're making as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which has elements to it that will help, say, transit agencies take out diesel emitting buses and replace them with electric transit, like we see in Whatcom County and in Everett, where we're seeing investment in the Inflation Reduction Act bill that will help ports electrify themselves so they can so ships can plug into electricity instead of burning bunker fuel and pushing out emissions into communities where these ships are waiting to be loaded. So it's going to take a lot of little steps that are part of the bill that is fighting climate change that we passed in August. And the first and foremost is we need to implement that. We need to make that bill happen, and I'm committed to doing that. Thanks, Michael.
You bet. Thank you. Candidate Matthews, same question to you.
Well, it's interesting that when someone makes a flat statement that climate change is human caused, that is not a scientific statement, that's a political statement. It is not settled science, it's settled political science in some people's minds. But even in as late as, January of this last year, more than 1,400 scientists from around the world issued a definitive paper stating that climate change is not the crisis that it's being made to be. It is a crisis, but it's not is overwhelming, as I said, and they said that humans account for 5% of climate change. Certainly we have our part to take, but when you consider anything from sunspots to all the other natural causes that we have no control over, we'd better throttle back a little bit. As a pilot, I'm intimately familiar with aviation, especially in aviation and weather phenomena like that. And I can talk conversely, especially about climate around the world. We can see the climate off the coast and what it's doing, and whether it's La Nina or El Nino and all those natural effects. What we need to stop doing is saying that we can solve it all by destroying the economies of the world with cures that are actually more onerous than the problem itself. That's our challenge.
Thank you. Let me go now again to you, Candidate Matthews. Criminal justice reform has dominated the news, and calls for reform have been wide-ranging, in part due to the disparate racial impacts. What, if any, actions could be taken at the federal level to address this issue?
Well, there we come back to the statesmanship, the civility issue, and working together to find the common ground. The common ground cannot be to say that we're not going to enforce the law, that we're going to let criminals run free, that we won't pursue them with our police force, that we'll undermine the police and say we'll defund them, and other answers that are not a solution. Like I said, it's a cure that is worse than the problem. What we need to do is come together and speak as one people. The division in America is acute, and it is a political division. We are a people that are not racist. We're not at each other's throats. And to call people terrorists because they disagree with you, or semi-Nazis, or whatever, fascists, whatever the term is, that's divisive, and it is not constructive to the process that we want and that we need to address criminal justice reforms in all its aspects. The streets of Chicago are falling apart. What we need to do is come together, even as families, and realize that we need to rebuild the family, the bedrock of society, and not undermine the family, which is what's happening. We need to rebuild our communities and come together as communities. Everywhere I go, people are concerned about law and order and the breakdown of society. This does not serve us well, and we need to agree as a nation that this is an existent crisis that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you. The same question to you, Candidate Larsen.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I can look back on my time in Congress and point to numerous times where I have funded local law enforcement as well as federal law enforcement. The calls to defund the FBI are irresponsible. They need to be stopped. The calls to defund police need to be stopped as well. My example is that most recently is that we voted to fund a program that helps local entities like a city of Bellingham or in Whatcom County hire local law enforcement with help from the federal government. So you can put deputies or local police officers on the street. We need to combine that as well, though, with ensuring accountability measures where there are problems. And that's why we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in the U.S. House last year, in order to ensure that a lot of the things we're already doing in our state with police training, on bias training, racial bias training, on sensitivity training, on mental health training, things we already do in Washington State. I just want other agencies around, law enforcement agencies around the country, to do what our law enforcement people have been doing for years. I think we are a great model, and we need to. I think we should be exporting that model around to other states, counties, and city law enforcement.
Thanks.
This next question. I don't know that my challenge card is showing.
I did not see it. We have a challenge, so you have 30 seconds in which to voice your challenge, and then Candidate Larsen, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, Mr. Larsen, what I want to address is 87,000 armed IRS agents. What in the world are we coming to? If you divide that by 200, it's 435. There are 435 congressional districts. what is going on. When a force is added to the existing force, that's a force equal to 3/4 the size of the Marine Corps. Why? We have an 88% compliance rate with taxes in America. There's something going on when a party wants an armed police force ready to go after Americans that disagree with their positions.
And Candidate Larsen,
yeah, Michael,
Michael,
thanks. I don't want to contribute to political polarization, but that is a whack job conspiracy that is out on the internet. It is not true. I don't know where it came from. We need to invest in an IRS that goes after tax scofflaws, that goes after the richest Americans who are avoiding their taxes, the corporations in this country who are avoiding their taxes. And we're going to do that by auditing, not by arming. So I don't know where this comes from. It is a crazy conspiracy theory.
Okay. The next question will go to you first, Candidate Larsen. What policies would you propose to ensure that we have a stable, skilled labor force that is adequate to support our local agricultural economy over the long term?
Thanks, Michael. We need to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill that recognizes the contribution that people make who are in this country, who are working, they're paying their taxes, and give them an opportunity to get a legal permanent residency, including a pathway to citizenship. As part of that comprehensive reform, we need to address farm worker availability and farm worker availability, as well as what the employers need, and do a better job of matching those two elements. We have an H-2A program that works for some agricultural communities and doesn't work for others. The H-2A program does need a separate reform. There's legislation in Congress that have supported to do just that. It will help better match up the available agricultural workforce with what employers need. And that workforce, the people in that workforce, need to know that they're going to be paid fairly, treated humanely as well. So there will be rules that come with that, and there ought to be. So I think that when you look at the issue of agricultural workforce and reforms necessary, that's going to need to take place within a broader context of what has been needed for a long time, that is comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you. Candidate Matthews, the same question.
Yet in 22 years, that hasn't happened. And I wonder when you, Mr. Larsen, and others are going to get about that very issue, because right now we have a porous border that's allowing people to come across the border unchecked. And it's a tragedy of human proportions. Saying that these are all farm workers or that they should all be agriculture workers is in effect racist at its core, because many of these people do have skills, and what they want is the opportunity. What we need is a border that is secure and that allows people in who want to contribute to society, but make sure that we're not being invaded. The drugs and the human trafficking is a nightmare of a dilemma. And until we solve that crisis, the crisis in our ag community cannot be addressed adequately. We need education and other resources brought to bear for all these people. But since Mr. Biden took office, more than 4 million people have come into this country, not screened and not allowed to be vetted so that we know where their expertise is and what their intention is. And many of those young children who are sucked into human trafficking, what a tragedy. They're ghost children without IDs, without birth dates, and they disappear. We've got to stop that. That's more a pressing dilemma than anything I can think of.
Thank you very much, Candidate Matthews. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for our questions. We have 5 more wonderful questions that the committee put together. And I hope that I know that those are being addressed to other places and as part of both of your campaigns. Now let's turn to your closing statements. You'll have 1 minute for a closing statement. And let's start with Candidate Larsen.
Well, thank you to the League of Women Voters of all the counties that I have the privilege to represent for an opportunity to speak to you all tonight. I'm Rick Larsen. I'm your U.S. Congressman. I'm running for re-election, and I'd like your support. I have focused my efforts over the last 2 years on economic growth to pull us out of the recession that was caused by the pandemic. The economy is on the move. It is no longer on the mend, but we still have issues that we have to deal with in the economy. Unemployment rate is low, but people are still being challenged with higher costs. That's why I've supported an effort to let Medicare negotiate lower drug prices for our seniors. Why I'm helping to continue the efforts to invest in our economy by investing in transportation infrastructure, helping our veterans deal with their health care. I would like your support when you go to the ballot very soon. Thanks.
Candidate Matthews, your closing statement, please.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. There are so many issues that need to be addressed. And over 22 years, Mr. Larsen has had his chance, and it's time for him to retire. It's time for a change. It's time to honestly address the issues before us that in large part are in the lap of the Democrat Party, who has failed to deal with them and has exacerbated them. The economy is not on the mend. We are in a recession and people are feeling it. And to say otherwise is to ignore reality. We must not return to power those who got us into this mess in the first place. And that includes Rick Larsen. I'm Dan Matthews. I entered this race because I care, because like I said, what kind of America, what kind of a world do we want to leave the next generation? Mr. Larsen and his family have lived for many years in Bethesda, Maryland. His kids never attended school, K through 12, in the state of Washington, yet he purports to comment on our schools. What experience does he have in that regard? He is detached and aloof, and he needs to be replaced.
Thank you, candidate Matthews. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I thank the candidates for being here today and for their interest in running for public office. Voters can find more information about the candidates online at vote411.org, and in your voter pamphlet. Ballots will be mailed October 9th, 2022. Your ballot must be postmarked or in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on November 8th. Please remember to sign your ballot envelope, and if mailing by postal service, we recommend that you mail early. Thank you so much to both of our candidates and for those who joined us to listen to this forum.
Thank you.
Go Mariners.